State Senator Bill Eigel, who joins us on KCMO. Bill, we appreciate the time as always. Let me just start off with this. I mean, kind of a broad question, not meant to be too blunt, but are you guys going to get anything done this year? Because it seems like there's already infighting going on down there.
Well, good morning, Pete. Happy New Year. And I tell you what, I always try to be optimistic about these things. So, the beginning of the session is very much like the beginning of a new baseball season, right? Everybody's even in the standings. Hope springs eternal. And so we're going to do everything we can to get the big red Republican things done. I think what you're referring to is the fact that, hey, for the past few years, we haven't been able to move the big red Republican priorities over the finish line. One of the big ones, of course, is IP reform. We didn't get that done last year, and I hate to say this, Pete, but 2 weeks into session, our leadership over in the Senate and in the House still have not even referred the IP reform bills to committee. So we're already picking up where we left off last year. So, yeah, the storm clouds are already beginning to gather. We formed a new Freedom Caucus this year, which is kind of getting the old conservative caucus band back together, but in a more updated and more aggressive format. So we're looking forward to that. And, if we don't get those big things done, my commitment is that the people of this state are going to know exactly what went on, because we're going to be putting the soft Republicans on the record for why they don't want to move our big priorities.
What else? I mean, you mentioned IP reform, intellectual property for people that don't know. What else? I mean, as Missourians are looking down to you guys to see what will improve this year, hopefully for them, what else is on the agenda that you have concerns on potentially getting done, despite the fact that the Republicans have the House, the Senate, and, of course, the governor's seat?
Well, if I had to pick one thing that we ought to get done, it ought to be to cut personal property taxes. I mean, I know that right now in Kansas City right now, regular property tax assessments and personal property tax assessments are up to the tune of more than 35%. So the fact that people are struggling just to be able to afford their home, just to be able to keep the car, because we here in Missouri have to go down to the county office every December 1st and pay rent to government for the crime of owning a car. I don't know why these super majorities down in Jefferson City of Republicans that claim to want to lower the tax burden can't seem to get something done on an item like personal property tax, which most other states have gotten rid of. So that is one of my top priorities. We've got to lower the tax burden in the state, or I just think that we're going to continue to stagnate and fall behind the other big red states in this country.
What, when you think about leadership, I know, and we certainly have all seen it play out a little bit on social media too, you and those in leadership in the Senate in particular have certainly gone back and forth. I mean, is it personal? Why are some of these things that seem like layups in a red state not getting done?
Yes, great question. No, it's not personal. And I think that if the leadership were on this interview with me, they would concur that it's not personal. However, what I think it is, they may disagree with. I think that in Jefferson City right now, there is a status quo that is being driven by some of the powerful special interests in this state. It's kind of the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, some of the business special interest groups that are driving what their priorities are, and their priorities tend to benefit very few among us and the very powerful among us, not the broader context of the electorate as a whole. In fact, we mentioned personal property tax. Pete, one of the unique things about my personal property tax bill to lower that tax burden on our cars is the fact that bill is unique because it doesn't have a single lobbyist or single special interest that's down in Jefferson City that's being paid to fight for its passage. So even though if something like that were to go to a vote of the people, it probably gets 80 to 90% support from the people of this state, it really struggles even in a supermajority of Republicans because too much of the Republican establishment is driven by lobbyists and special interests and not what the people need and what they want. So I have constantly faced uphill battles on issues like this because I have never had a problem rubbing against the grain of the status quo. So I've made a career out of that, and quite frankly, I've become probably one of the most hated guys down in the hallways of Jefferson City because I won't assimilate into that status quo. I'm the guy that's trying to undo that status quo. So I think that this conversation is going to play itself out extensively in 2024. Missouri's got a big decision to make in 2024 if we want more of that status quo or if we're willing to kick over some apple carts and take our place of leadership alongside the Texases and Tennessees of this country.
Bill Eigel, he's running for governor. He's in the state Senate. He's joining us on KCMO. Now, you mentioned there, you're not the most popular guy. And listen, I'm a couple hundred miles away, but I get that vibe as well, just monitoring from afar. So if you're running for governor, I mean, if you were governor, is that a leadership thing where a governor can kind of try to bring people together behind closed doors? Is that being done at all? Should it be getting done? Where does that role as governor factor into the lack of movement on some of these big things in Jeff City?
Yeah, great question. Let me rephrase. How would I, as governor, bring a very fractured Republican Party back together and get them pointed towards those big policy wins, right? And actually, ironically, the answer is actually quite simple. I'll do what Mike Parson is not doing, and I'll be up there as the governor of this state calling on Republicans to do Republican things. I mean, that's why the Republican Party is fractured. When Mike Parson goes out there and tells Republicans that we need to be raising the gas tax, that we need to be growing spending down in Jefferson City, that we need to be expanding government through a whole bunch of new bureaucracy and new government programs, which is unfortunately mostly what he's done down in Jefferson City for the past 5 years, that fractures the Republican Party because there's guys like me and there's a heck of a lot of everyday Republicans all over the state that didn't sign up for that when it came time for campaign season. On the other hand, instead of talking about growing government, imagine if we had a governor that walked up there in his State of the State Union address State of the State address every year, and instead of saying I want to grow government and spend more money and increase the tax burden, he said, let's protect the farmland in this state from being bought by foreign countries. Let's get rid of personal property tax and unleash the economy in this state instead of paying off our corporate welfare partners and the special interest crowd. And you know what? Let's be a leader in this country so that the Ron DeSantis's and the Greg Abbotts of this country turn on their TVs in the morning and say, man, what can we do to be more like the Show Me state? That's the kind of future I'm talking about. And as I go around the state, I'm meeting tens of thousands of Republicans that are angry that that is not happening. My message to them in 2024 is they're not alone. There's millions of Republicans that want Missouri to be a leader in this country, and they don't have to be afraid of a special interest swamp that's telling them why each of these big red priorities can't be accomplished. We can accomplish them, and we will.
Bill Eigel, I have a minute here, but I did see that there's movement on potentially removing or phasing out an earnings tax, which right now exists in St. Louis and Kansas City, based on revenue gains. Is that something that you think ultimately could end up happening here in the next 60 seconds?
It's a long shot. The senators in Kansas City and St. Louis have been highly resistant to anything that would go after the earnings tax. I would just give you the caveat that I'm going to be in support of that. I've never met a tax I didn't think need to be lowered or eliminated. But until you have leadership from the statewide level, and again, this is an issue that I don't think Mike Parson has said a word about once again, until you have leadership from the highest levels of government, I think that getting a big change like that is going to be very difficult.
He is Bill Eigel. He's running for governor, state senator, joining us on KCMO. Great to have you on, Bill. Have a good weekend and stay warm. We appreciate the time.
Thanks, Pete. We'll talk real soon.
We will talk soon. That is Bill Eigel running for governor and in the state Senate down in Jeff City on KCMO.